In this video, you are going to see Patrick François, professor and director of the Vancouver School of Economics at UBC, giving some insights based on his scientific research on the current situation in Myanmar. All those insights are based on his scientific research, but without any technical term and in very accessible language.
I'm going to talk about what can go wrong with this plan. Okay, what can go wrong is what actually went wrong. I think the key problem here is the Tatmadaw had to preserve their share of the influence and benefits long enough for this path to be continued on. And after 2015, the Tatmadaw could reasonably have anticipated that the NLD would have been quite unpopular as a government and that they would have had a significant role in future governments, either via their party or through direct input. Okay, why is this? Well, because one, Myanmar's difficult to govern. Okay, it's an amazingly heterogeneous country with many different ethnic groups and with much conflict along the periphery. Two, Aung San Suu Kyi was popular, but she was certainly untested as a leader. And I think in many ways, some of the disappointment with her as a leader has been manifest. She has been autocratic. She has been, even to her own supporters, they've criticized her for failing to repeal many of the repressive laws, to speak out about political prisoners, and for her attacks on the media. Reform has been slow and governance has been quite poor. The NLD has refrained from diminishing the military's power. Additionally, the Rohingya genocide received strong condemnation. And the Tatmadaw have really largely been the greatest economic beneficiaries of the expansion. Okay, yet, despite all this, what happened in November in 2020 was that she won an even greater majority than in the 2015 elections. So more than 70% of eligible voters turned out, and the NLD won more than 80% of the vote, surprisingly high. So clearly, this capacity of the regime to threaten for power has fallen faster than anticipated. It's simply unimaginable that the level of dissent we're seeing now could have happened in 2015. So what we think happens is the Tatmadaw saw evidence that this is happening and it could fall further still. What's the evidence? Well, there's lots of it. Firstly, the level of unrest we're seeing now. Secondly, there have been an increase in desertions from the military. Many soldiers must have voted for the NLD. Just with these massive numbers, you see areas which are essentially military townships also were electing representatives from the NLD. So what happened, we think, is exactly what's happened by Matheson conjectured, is the coup was a preemptive strike. Okay, so what happened is it was a preemptive strike. How could have this been been avoided? One, there are two problems, right? One is their popularity fell too fast and there's insufficient benefits to them prior to their permanent decline in power. So what could have happened, what could have been done instead was to increase their power share, right? So this is the opposite of the direction that everyone's talking about in terms of constitutional change. It was to be to give them more power, not less. Increase transfers to the Tatmadaw. Again, this is the opposite to what happened, okay? And here the international community is doing what's morally right. They're saying, look, Ming Aung H'laing was clearly involved, not just involved, orchestrated the genocide against the Rohingya. He should be punished. And they did. They froze his assets. But of course, this goes in the opposite direction of increasing benefits to the democratization. Gradualizing the decline in the Tatmadaw's power would have been another thing they could have done. So there was already forbearance on the part of the NLD. I think precisely for this reason, they could have gone further. Okay, so what's the current situation? Now we have, and I'm just going to wrap up quickly. I know I'm nearly out of time. The current situation is the junta, the Tatmadaw is essentially finding it very difficult to govern. Okay, so why? Well, there are a lot of things happening on the part of the population. There is a civil disobedience movement. There are strikes, absenteeism. There's hostility in traditional Tatmadaw strongholds. So in the areas where the Tatmadaw has never faced problems in the lowlands. There are there's armed, primitively armed, but armed resistance happening all over the country. Okay? The banking system's close to collapse, and government revenues have plunged, partly because the government is suffering such high rates of absenteeism. So how have they reacted? Well, they've increased repression. At the same time, there's increasing conflict with the ethnic armed organizations. A lot of this is happening in Shan State, but it's possible that it could ignite across the whole country. In addition, and this is now on the side of the population, in addition to the brutal repression that they're suffering now, there's a possible humanitarian crisis brewing. The economy is already vulnerable due to COVID, and the monsoon's coming. So the planting season prior to the monsoon has to happen, or else there could be a food shortage. A big fear for the Tamadaw is that there's increased unity amongst the ethnic armed organizations. Okay. There's even talk of those organizations in the liberated areas forming a federal army and a real federation that would be comprised of EAOs initially. The EAOs are trying to expand in areas of control that were previously pretty solidly Tamadaw. So what's happening is the Tamadaw is getting squeezed at both ends. Okay. So here's where I'm going to be speculative and make some predictions. So what I think cannot happen is a reversion back to the 2015-2020 situation. I think we have to move on and understand that this top-down transition is over. Okay, if the Tamadaw were to back down, they would simply be confirming the thing that they most fear. That is that they are unable to threaten for power. If they were to back down now and let the parliament sit, they would be forever neutered, forever, at least for the foreseeable future. So I think that's just not possible. So any sort of possibility of a diplomatic solution here, I don't see. What I think can happen, and which I think is likely, and I'll tell you why I think it's likely in a second, is a reversion to autocracy. The Tamadaw will eventually weather the protests, they'll weather the civil dissent, the increased conflict with the EAOs will not threaten them sufficiently, and democracy will be suppressed. We'll move to something that looks like, well, prior to 2010 anyway. So what I think can also happen more optimistically, but I'm going to say unlikely, is a bottom-up transition. Okay, so here, this could happen if the ethnic armed organizations consolidate, and if they consolidate with the NLD pro-democracy movement. There's already a CRPH. This is this committee. This is essentially comprised of individuals who were elected to the parliament but are not able to take their seats after the coup. They are already circulating an alternative federal constitution, a truly federal one that would incorporate not just autonomy, but a true federation in the ethnic areas. I think this can't happen unless the Tamadaw breaks apart. Okay, and why? Well, just the numbers. The Tamadaw is 500,000 or so soldiers. If you add up all the EAOs, maybe they add up to a fifth of that, probably not that far. And the Tamadaw is simply way better resourced. Okay, so I think I'm nearly out of time. On that pessimistic note, let me just say what we learned from this. We think that even when democratic transitions are beneficial for everyone, they may not be chosen by autocrats. And why? They just reasonably worry that they'll not get any share of the promised gains. And we think this is what happened in Myanmar. Here, they tried to engineer a type of power sharing that was, mandated, not mandated, sort of organized under a constitution. And the international community played an important role in conditioning the benefits on respecting the power sharing agreement. But it's not a real democracy, but it's a lot better than what we had. It's a partial democratization. It has a lot of unsatisfactory elements. They're listed here. But even with that, there are real threats to it happening. And the biggest one is a dramatic decline in the previous autocrat's power can easily derail it. And I think that's exactly what happened in the case of Myanmar. And that's where we are today.